Hi all, this day I will show you another game of the Chessable Masters 2020. It's from round 4 featuring world champion Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces and yet again Daniil Dubov with the black pieces. After his second round defeat against Artemiev, Dubov actually won his match in round 3 against Harikrishna. So the question is, how will he fare against the world champion with the black pieces? Um, Also, I forgot to mention the format and time control in the previous video. So in each group, A and B, there are 6 players, and each player play each other twice in rapid chess over 10 rounds, with the top 4 of each group advancing to the knockout stage. The time control is 15 minutes for all moves, with a 10-second increment from move 1. So, with that being said, let's get into the game. So, Magnus opens with d4. Daniil replies with knight to f6, the Indian game, knight to f3, and now c6, the Czech variation of the Indian game. We have h3 by Magnus, an uncommon move, d6 by Dubov, bishop to f4, knight b to d7, and e3. The London system is on the board as well. We have g6 by Dubov, bishop to e2, bishop to e7, and now both sides castle. We have c4 by Magnus, trying to control the center, and now knight to e4, centralizing the knight. Bishop to, queen to c2, challenging the knight, and now we have e4. Now we need to check what if uh, Magnus just takes on e4. Well, then we get knight to f6. The queen has to retreat. We can take on f4, and now we play e4, and white is looking much stronger here. If white tries to capture, actually black has a slight advantage with knight to h5, challenging the f4 pawn. Queen to d2, bishop to h6, g3, and now this pawn is hanging. So it is uh, it is a little trick Magnus prepared, but if Magnus actually pushes e4 here, he will be much stronger. But in the game, actually none of this happened. So in the game, after e5, Magnus didn't take an e4, but he retreated his bishop to h2. And now there are a few options for Dubov. One of them is just play f5, defending the knight, but Dubov actually retreats the knight to g5. We have knight b to d2, and now takes on f3, and rook to e8. So both sides have a solid position. Black is a little bit underdeveloped with his bishop cemented on c8, but it should be no problem and it should have enough time to actually get his pieces out. Rook f to d1, queen to e7, rook a to c1, just trying to get some action on these files. E times d4. And now, how do you recapture? Do you recapture with the pawn or do you recapture with the knight? So let's check out the knight first. So what will black do here? Well, we have a5, maybe rook to d2, knight to c5, bishop to c3, and both black and white, they look perfectly fine here. But what happened in the game, Magnus actually recaptured with the pawn, and this now opens up a trick, um, unfortunately for Magnus. So can you spot it? What Dubov played here to gain a slight advantage? What happened here is that Dubov actually played bishop to h6. Yeah, it's attacking this rook, and also it is now threatening this. And so what happened if he took immediately? So what if this happened? Well, this would actually be a terrible mistake, since white can play e1, and if white captures, white can actually go here, bishop to f8, and now take the queen, and black is in a whole lot of trouble. It has to play f6, we get rook to e2, king to f7, and now slowly but surely the black king is getting oppressed here. There's nothing you can do. This bishop is cemented here. You cannot get this rook into the game. Yeah, so it's just horrible for black. For example, this line, well, it's just white is just extremely strong here. So that was a little trick that that Magnus prepared while playing this e times d4. So there's poison in this position. So um, can you take here? I don't think so. And also Dubov didn't think so, and he played actually bishop to h6. And what makes this different? For example, what if you just, you know, move the rook and now you take here? Now the problem is you cannot play this since the queen is now undefended, so black cannot take here, and with this, black should be okay because he's just a queen up. So this should be no problem. So with which bishop to h6, by removing the defender of the queen, this piece is now up for grabs. So Magnus has to move the piece in order not to lose it. So he played bishop to d3. So after bishop to d3, Dubov takes on c1. We have takes on c1 with the queen. Queen to f6, trying to centralize the queen a bit more. Bishop to f4. Knight to f8, with the idea of just releasing this bishop. We have bishop to g5, and now queen to h8. And bit of a peculiar spot for the queen. Maybe queen g7 was a bit better, but okay. Queen h8. We had d5 by Magnus. Takes and takes. And now knight back to d7. The knight can now actually go here, and it will provide a much better place for the knight. Plus, he can still develop his light square bishop afterwards. So bishop to b5, pinning the knight. Queen to g7. Bishop to h6. And now queen to f6 again. Magnus Carlsen, he smells blood and he plays rook to d4. A nice rook lift, maybe with ideas of going to f4 and maybe going to this f7 pawn, or maybe going to h4 with ideas of maybe attacking the h7 pawn at some point. But Dubov is not rattled and he plays a6. Rook to f4 is played, queen to a7, and now Magnus takes on d7. We have bishop takes and bishop to g5, further pushing this queen back. But Dubov plays rook to c8, and actually this gives a Magnus Carlsen a great opportunity to equalize the game. So I wonder, can you spot it? Why to play and what to do here to equalize the game? So can you see it? Actually, it is queen takes c8. And the thing is, you take a queen, you have to take back with the bishop, and now you take an e7, rook takes, and the material is completely equal. So this was the way to go for Magnus. However, Magnus decided to play queen to a1. And unfortunately, this is not a good move because it allows queen to e2, infiltration of the black queen. Now we have b3, opening up this diagonal with maybe ideas of a checkmate on g7. We have rook to c2 with threats of checkmate on his own. Bishop to h4, defending this f2 pawn. And now rook to b2, just closing off this diagonal for any sort of shenanigans here. We have queen to h2, and now queen to c2, preparing to actually trap the queen so he's forced to trade. We have rook to c4, and now, as mentioned, queen to b1, and we have takes and takes on b1, with rook to c7 now. We have bishop to f5, and now maybe you can take here, and you get bishop to f4, and then it's either you lose this pawn, um, so maybe you will do like something like this with takes, knight here, attack, maybe defend here. The position looks all right actually for black here. So after bishop f5, Magnus didn't capture on b7, but instead he played bishop to f6 with maybe ideas of knight to g5 and pressuring the f7 pawn. So Dubov plays h6, the well, defending this g5 square, and now knight to d2 with maybe ideas of actually going it on the other way around. And now we have rook to d1 and bishop to c4 played by Magnus. But now rook takes d5, and now this pawn is protected, so Magnus cannot go here anymore. And instead he opted for taking the pawn on b7. So we have bishop to e6, and now rook to a7, trying to grab another pawn. Rook to d1, and now knight to b2. So can you grab the pawn here? You can, but it would simplify the position even more, and that is not in Magnus's favor. He needs those pieces on the board in order to actually have a chance here. So uh, he played knight to b2, trying to preserve his knight, and now we get rook to d2 and king to g3. Just to remember, the knight is actually protected by the bishop, so you cannot take. So g5, and now Magnus grabs the pawn. Rook to c8, and now h4. We have maybe Magnus' ideas of bringing his rook into the game like this. So Dubov takes. We have king to f3, and now rook c to c2, with ideas of maybe getting those pawns, but also there's a possible attack of check and picking up the bishop. So Magnus plays knight to a4, and actually this is not this is a mistake, because Dubov plays rook to f2, king to e3, and now picking up the bishop. And it was in this position that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game. So could have he played something different here? Um, in the end, it was well, maybe h4 was not a good move, but already the position here was as good as lost really for white. There's no attacking possibilities really. He tried with this, but with king f3, he allowed this little trick, and it's either a capture here, or it's a capture on on b2 or on f2, picking up the piece. So there's nothing else you could have done here. So a great game by Dubov, defeating world champion Magnus Carlsen. I really enjoyed this game. I thought it was great, especially in with the with let me see, where is it? With this move, what to do, e takes or knight takes. Carlsen tried a trick with pawn takes d4, but unfortunately for him, he fell into a trick by Dubov. So I hope you enjoyed this game. And please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.